My name is Riley. I'm 28 years old, and I've spent most of my life fading into the background of my own family. If my sister Ava, 31 now, was the sun, I was the shadow that followed her around. She was always louder, brighter, and somehow always in the spotlight while I was the one holding the camera, clapping in the background. Growing up, it wasn't just favoritism, it was full-on emotional neglect. My parents, David and Sandra, had this unspoken rule that Ava came first, always. If she got a B on a test, it was, she's trying her best. If I got an A, silence. The first used to think I was imagining things, that maybe I was just being dramatic or needy. But kids aren't stupid. You can tell when your wins aren't celebrated, when your pain is ignored, when your worth is measured by someone else's glow. It wasn't just about grades or birthday parties. It was about the little things, like how my art projects got shoved into drawers while Ava's science trophies got a spot on the living room shelf, or how they'd sit through her soccer games like it was the Super Bowl, but couldn't be bothered to attend my school play where I had the lead role. I kept telling myself, they love me, just differently. But that kind of love doesn't soothe you when you're sitting alone after your dance recital, watching all the other kids rush to their parents, arms wide open. By the time I hit 17, I knew one thing for sure: I needed out. So the moment I turned 18, I packed up and left. No dramatic exit, no yelling, just silence. I moved across the city, got a job waiting tables, and started building my own life brick by painful brick. And for the first time, I felt something that scared and excited me: freedom. That freedom came with a heavy cost, though, because while I was out here figuring things out, Ava was still playing the golden child role, and she made sure I never forgot my place. She'd feed my parents lies about me, said I was partying, using drugs, and blowing through relationships like it was nothing. It wasn't true, not even a little, but they believed her. Instantly, I offered to take a drug test to prove I wasn't some out-of-control mess. My dad didn't even look up from his coffee when I said it. My mom? She just told me she wasn't in the mood for drama. So I did the only thing that made sense. I stopped calling. I blocked their numbers. 2 full years of radio silence. It was the only way to stop feeling like I was walking into a house where love had conditions. And in that space, without their noise, I started to grow. I built something beautiful. My little apartment became my sanctuary. I worked hard, landed a marketing job I loved, met someone kind and genuine, and started rediscovering what it meant to be me, not Ava's sister, just Riley. Still, no matter how far you run, some things find you. When I was 25, I got a call. I never expected. My dad had been rushed to the hospital, and despite everything, my heart pulled me back. I sat by his bedside for days, feeding him soup, cracking awkward jokes, pretending like we hadn't been strangers for years. Maybe it was guilt. Maybe it was hope. Either way, it reopened a door I thought I'd slammed shut. We started talking again. Hesitant, clumsy conversations, but it felt like progress. Mom thawed too. She even hugged me once, which, considering the last time she touched me was to yank a brush through my hair at age 10, felt weirdly monumental. Ava wasn't thrilled. She'd pop in during hospital visits and barely acknowledge me. She made sarcastic jabs, pretending to joke, but always managing to sting. Like when she said, "Glad to see you've stopped playing the victim for attention." I just smiled and kept my mouth shut. I wasn't going to let her drag me into another round of emotional tug-of-war. Around this time, my parents started opening up about some financial stress. Nothing dramatic, just hints about tight months and unexpected bills. I offered to help, not because they asked, but because I wanted to rebuild something with them. And yeah, maybe a small part of me thought, if I support them now, maybe they'll finally see me. I covered utilities for a few months, paid off one of their credit cards, never said a word about it. I didn't want gratitude, I wanted peace. And for a little while, it worked. They'd call just to chat. They'd ask about my job. They even posted a birthday message for me on Facebook, which, trust me, was headline-worthy in my family. Ava hated it. She rolled her eyes when Dad mentioned how I'd helped out, said I was trying to buy affection. But for once, they didn't take her side, and that felt like a win. Then came the next chapter. A year later, my partner Eli proposed. It was simple, private, and absolutely perfect. I was glowing. We set a date, picked a venue, sent out invites. And yes, I invited my parents and Ava. Despite everything, I wanted them there. Because no matter how hurt I'd been, I still craved that image in my head, the one where my mom zips up my dress. My dad gives a toast, and my sister hugs me like she means it. Spoiler, that image shattered. What happened next wasn't just disappointing, it was something that burned so deep. I don't know if I'll ever fully heal from it. Planning the wedding was like building a dream I'd never been allowed to have. Every detail, every color, every piece of it was something I chose not. Ava, not my mom, not anyone else, just me. That made it feel sacred in a way. Eli and I picked a Saturday in early spring. The weather was perfect, not too hot, not too chilly, just that sweet spot where even the air feels celebratory. We sent out our invitations months in advance, made sure to check in with guests, and arranged everything to be as convenient and welcoming as possible. And yeah, I sent the invite to my parents and Ava too. Despite all the history, I wanted them there. Deep down, I think I still believed they'd show up, maybe even try. I told myself they couldn't possibly ignore something this big. After all, it was my wedding day. But you know what they say, old patterns don't break just because you want them to. The day of the wedding, I was getting ready in a small bridal suite at the venue. My hair was curled, makeup done, dress hanging on the door. I looked in the mirror and hardly recognized myself. I looked happy, nervous, sure, but excited. The room buzzed with my friends and Eli's sister, who had basically adopted me as her own sibling at this point. People were laughing, pouring mimosas, snapping photos. It was everything I wanted, except they weren't there. At first, I wasn't worried. We planned for early afternoon, and I figured maybe my parents were just running late. Ava was always dramatic, always made a point of arriving just late enough to be noticed. But the clock kept ticking. 5 minutes, 10, 15, still no sign. I started to feel that old, familiar knot in my stomach, the one I used to get when I'd wait in the school hallway, hoping someone would pick me up on time. "Should we wait?" I asked my maid of honor quietly. She frowned, checking her phone. "Only for a bit, babe. Everyone else is here." I nodded. "Let's give it another 10. Those 10 minutes passed like glue dripping down a wall. Sticky, heavy, slow, every second stretched. I kept peeking toward the venue doors like they'd walk in with big apologetic smiles. Maybe they got caught in traffic. Maybe Ava had a wardrobe malfunction. Then, as if the universe wanted to slap me with the truth, I got a notification. A photo. Ava had posted on Instagram. A sunny selfie with our parents, all grinning like they'd just won the lottery. The caption? "Family lunch! So good to be home." The timestamp? 15 minutes after the ceremony was supposed to begin. They weren't just skipping. They were throwing a casual get-together. On my wedding day. That was the moment something inside me broke. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just this quiet internal snap like a rubber band stretched too far. I felt myself freeze. Everyone around me blurred into background noise. No call, no apology, no excuse. They chose her. Again. I don't remember much of the ceremony after that. I walked down the aisle, smiled through it, kissed Eli, cut the cake, danced. But inside, something had shifted. I wasn't sad. I was done. It didn't even feel like grief anymore. It felt like clarity. The next day, when things calmed down and our guests left, I sent a message. Just one. Short, direct. I saw the post. "Thanks for confirming what I've always known. Please don't contact me again. I'm not your second best anymore. I'm not your anything." They responded, "Of course." First came my mom's. We didn't think it would be a big deal since Ava's lunch was already planned. Then my dad tried the classic. "We were hoping to come after, but your timing didn't work for us." Ava didn't even bother pretending, just sent a smug, "Not everything is about you, Riley." That was it. I blocked them. Phone, email, socials, all of it. You'd think that would be the end, right? Clean break. Fresh start. But no. Because when people lose control over you, they panic. Suddenly, I was selfish. Suddenly, I owed them a conversation. Suddenly, my boundaries became their crisis. My inbox started filling with messages from extended family cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. Uncles who barely remembered my birthday. They all chimed in. "You only get one family." Maybe they made a mistake, but was it worth cutting them off? "Your parents are heartbroken." Right, heartbroken, but not enough to miss dessert at Ava's lunch. I didn't respond. I didn't defend myself, because I was tired of explaining my pain to people who'd never really listened to it in the first place. Instead, I poured myself into my new life. Eli and I went on our honeymoon, and for the first time in forever, I felt weightless. No guilt, no begging for crumbs, just peace. But that peace came with shadows. Some nights I'd lie awake wondering, was I too harsh? Did I overreact? And then I'd remember the photo, the smiles, the choice they made without even flinching. No, I wasn't too harsh. I was finally being honest with myself. It's weird, isn't it? How we can chase love from people who've shown us 1,000 times. They don't have any to give. How we build our lives around their absence, trying to fill it with hope. But hope can rot if you let it. I've learned that silence can be healing, distance can be peace. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself is to walk away. That doesn't mean I don't miss what could have been. I do. I mourn the parents I never really had, the sister who never wanted me in her spotlight. But I no longer mourn me in that story. Because the version of Riley who needed their approval doesn't exist anymore. She left. And in her place, someone stronger, someone married, supported, and free. Still, life has a funny way of testing your peace. And a few weeks later, that peace got tested in the worst and most ridiculous way possible. Because Ava, she wasn't done. Not even close. Peace didn't last long. Eli and I were back from our honeymoon, still in that soft, golden haze of newlywed life. We were learning how to blend our rhythms, laundry routines, grocery habits, who got which side of the bed. It was simple, domestic, warm. I was finally living a version of happiness that felt earned. Then came the message. No apology, no olive branch, just Ava in all her entitlement, asking for money. It landed in my inbox like a punch. Hey, so I have this business idea I'm working on. I know you're doing well now, and it would really help if you could support me. Think of it as an investment. Let me know. I stared at the screen, reread it, then laughed out loud. This woman who hadn't even congratulated me on my marriage, who'd deliberately thrown a lunch on my wedding day and smiled through it, was now asking me to fund her project? The nerve. I didn't reply right away. I needed time to cool off, to figure out how to respond without spiraling back into that old pattern where I bend over backwards to keep the peace. But before I could say anything, she sent a second message. It's kind of selfish to ignore me. Just because you're married now doesn't mean you're better than us. If you really cared about this family, you'd help. There it was, the guilt trip, the same script she'd always used when things didn't go her way. It used to work. It used to make me question everything. Not anymore. This time, I replied, Ava, I don't owe you anything. I've spent my whole life playing backup in your show. You made your choices. You made it clear where we stand. I won't be financing anything. Good luck. It felt good. Not angry, not petty, just clear. She didn't take it well. Within an hour, my phone lit up with messages from my parents. My mom started with her usual passive-aggressive tone. I'm disappointed in how cold you've become. Dad followed with, Ava's just trying to build a future. Why can't you support her, like family should? Then came the big twist. They claimed they had dipped into Ava's college fund years ago to help me move out. A bold lie, considering I'd worked 2 jobs and paid my own rent from day one. But suddenly, they were rewriting history to make me look like the thief. And now, apparently, helping Ava was me repaying a family debt. I was floored. I sat there, phone in hand, just numb. Not because it hurt. Because I realized they were willing to twist the truth. Again, just to justify Ava's behavior. But I wasn't playing along anymore. I didn't respond. That silence seemed to infuriate them more than any fight ever could. A few days later, my parents showed up at my apartment. I wasn't home, thankfully, but my neighbor texted me about it. Said they were standing outside the building, arguing with the concierge when they weren't allowed up. They left a note at the front desk, a folded piece of paper with my name scribbled on the front. Inside, we're your real family. This distance isn't healthy. Let's fix things together. Ava's still your sister. I didn't open the door. I didn't respond. Because here's the truth. You can't fix something with people who don't believe they've broken anything. And yet, the messages kept coming. Emails, texts, even comments on my old Instagram posts. They'd alternate between guilt-tripping and demanding like they couldn't decide whether to play the victims or the enforcers. Then it escalated. Ava emailed me a proposal. A full PowerPoint presentation outlining her business plan, something to do with subscription boxes for luxury pet clothes, and a section labeled Funding Strategy. Right there, underlined, was my name. Initial family investment, $15,000 from Riley. I laughed so hard I cried. This wasn't even manipulation anymore. It was delusion. But what broke me, truly broke me, was the note at the end of the presentation. Riley, this is a chance to prove you're not as bitter and selfish as everyone thinks. That sentence felt like someone struck a match and dropped it into everything I'd worked to rebuild. I blocked her. Again, phone, email, everything. Then I blocked my parents. For the second time. I'd tried. I'd offered peace, forgiveness, even money. And they chose Ava again. Not just on my wedding day, but in every moment after. They didn't just ignore me. They used me, tried to spin their own failure into my responsibility. I was done. Truly, completely done. The thing is, when you set boundaries with people who've never respected yours, they don't see it as protection. They see it as betrayal, and they retaliate. That retaliation came through whispers. I started hearing from extended family, distant cousins asking why I cut off my parents after all they did for me. Family friends, tagging me in vague posts about loyalty and entitled children. I didn't respond to any of them because I wasn't going to debate my pain with people who only knew half the story. And the people who really knew me, they stayed close. Eli, my friends, his family, they wrapped me in the kind of support I never got growing up. Not the kind you have to earn, the kind you're just given. Freely. That's when it hit me. You don't have to keep people in your life just because you share DNA. Family isn't blood. Family is who shows up, who listens, who doesn't try to rewrite your story when the truth makes them uncomfortable. I'd spent years chasing a relationship that never really existed, trying to prove I was worthy of love to people who were never willing to give it. But not anymore. I'm building something new now, and if they can't respect it from afar, they don't get a seat at the table. Still, I thought that would be the end of it. Until a letter arrived, a thick envelope hand-delivered, no return address. Inside was something I never expected, a notice from a lawyer. I'll never forget the feeling of holding that envelope in my hands. It was thick, heavy, like it was carrying something it shouldn't. My name was written across the front in messy cursive, my mom's handwriting. But the document inside, that was from a law office. At first I thought it was some weird prank, or maybe an empty threat meant to scare me into calling. But once I opened it, I realized just how far they were willing to go. It wasn't a joke. It was a formal letter on a letterhead, signed by an actual attorney outlining something I couldn't believe I was reading, a claim for financial reimbursement. According to the document, my parents were requesting that I reimburse them for past expenses incurred on my behalf. Things like unrecouped child rearing costs, early rent assistance, and this one really knocked the air out of me: emotional damages from estrangement. Emotional damages. They actually put a dollar amount on my absence. $112,478. I remember just staring at the paper, not blinking, just sitting on the edge of my couch with this ridiculous letter in my lap, trying to process what kind of parents sue their own daughter for growing up. There was even a spreadsheet attached. Line items, grocery bills, school supplies, a pair of sneakers from 2007. It was so absurd, I almost laughed. Almost. But beneath the absurdity was something uglier, something cruel. It wasn't about money. Not really. It was about control. It was about trying to shame me back into submission. If emotional blackmail hadn't worked, they figured maybe financial blackmail would. Spoiler, it didn't. Still, I wasn't stupid. I knew this could turn messy if I didn't handle it right. So I called a lawyer someone Eli's friend recommended. She was sharp, direct, and didn't even flinch when I explained what was going on. "You're not the first person to be sued by toxic parents," she said. "Unfortunately, you won't be the last." She reviewed everything, then looked at me and said, "They don't have a case. Not a legal one anyway. But emotionally, that's where they're trying to bleed you." And she was right. The letter wasn't a real lawsuit. Just a threat, a way to scare me, to shake me up, but it did something else instead. It clarified everything. I wasn't crazy for cutting them off. I wasn't overreacting. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was what I'd been dealing with my entire life, dressed up in paperwork and bad intentions. The next morning, I drafted my response. Polite, firm, final. This letter confirms that I do not owe you any financial obligation, nor am I responsible for decisions you made of your own volition. Any further contact, legal or otherwise, will be considered harassment and handled accordingly. I sent it through my attorney. Let her be the wall between me and whatever firestorm they were trying to start. After that, the silence was deafening. For 2 weeks, nothing. No texts, no emails, no DMs. It was like they vanished. And for the first time, I breathed. But like always, that breath didn't last long. Because when the guilt doesn't work and the threats don't stick, some people go nuclear. Ava started posting online. At first, it was vague. Quotes about toxic siblings and narcissistic trauma. Hashtags like #FamilyFirst and #betrayal. But then she got specific. A storytime video on TikTok, her face to camera, tears in her eyes. My sister abandoned our family after we raised her. She left our sick dad. She took everything and now refuses to help. I guess money changes people. It blew up. She played the victim like she was born for it. Comments poured in. Strangers defending her, telling her to stay strong. Some even found my profile and started leaving nasty comments under old posts. It felt like drowning in someone else's lie. Eli was furious. We could sue her for defamation, he said. But I didn't want to play that game. I didn't want to fight fire with fire. I just wanted peace. I wanted my life back. So I did what I've always done. I documented everything. Screenshots, messages, dates, times. I made sure if this ever got legal, I had every piece of truth in my corner. And then I disappeared. Not literally, but digitally. I locked down my social media, changed my number, told close friends and Eli's family how to reach me, and went dark everywhere else. It felt drastic, but necessary. I was tired of being a character in Ava's performance, tired of being the villain in someone else's story. I had spent years trying to rewrite our family script, make it a happy one, make it fair, but they kept handing me a pen dipped in poison. So I stopped writing their version, started living mine. Still, it's hard, grieving a family that's still alive. It's a strange kind of pain. There's no funeral, no closure, just empty space where love should have been, and it gets lonelier before it gets lighter. Some nights, I lie in bed next to Eli, listening to him breathe, and wonder what it would feel like to have a mother who called just to say she missed me, a father who didn't keep a running tab of every dollar he spent, a sister who didn't see me as a competitor but as kin. But those aren't the people I got, and I've stopped waiting for them to change. Instead, I've been investing in the family I'm building. Eli and I adopted a dog, a chaotic little rescue mutt named Beans. He's loud, messy, and absolutely obsessed with me. He follows me room to room like a furry shadow, reminding me that love doesn't need conditions or guilt, just presence. We're also house hunting, something I never thought I'd be excited about. But now it feels like a fresh start, a new chapter written entirely by me. And yet, there's one more storm brewing. Because people like Ava, they don't go quiet for long. And the next message I got wasn't from her. It was from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. My cousin Maya. The message from Maya came in the form of a voice memo. Not a text, not a call. A minute and 42 seconds of breathy urgency sent to my backup number I'd only shared with a handful of people. Riley, hey, I know we haven't talked in a while, but you need to know something. I've been seeing what's happening with Ava, and I can't stay quiet anymore. I blinked at my phone. Maya and I used to be close cousins who stayed up watching rom-coms at family sleepovers, whispering about crushes and future dreams. But once I moved out and the family lines were drawn, she faded to the background. I hadn't heard her voice in nearly 4 years. I sat down, took a breath, and hit play again. Her words came out fast, like she'd been rehearsing them for weeks. Maybe she had. Ava's been lying to everyone. That TikTok? That whole performance? Yeah, fake. She told people your dad had a second heart surgery, that you left him in a hospital bed to go drink mojitos in Mexico. None of it happened. And the worst part, your parents know. I froze. They're letting her say it. They'd been feeding her details. Your mom even told Aunt Lisa you were acting unstable after the wedding. I didn't believe it then, but now I'm just done pretending. By the time her message ended, my hands were shaking. I shouldn't have been surprised. I really shouldn't have. But somehow, hearing it from someone inside the circle made it real in a way nothing else had. They weren't just hurting me behind closed doors. They were rewriting my story for anyone who'd listen. I called her. She answered on the first ring. Hey, she said softly. I wasn't sure you'd respond. I wasn't sure either, I admitted. But thank you for telling me. Maya sighed. I wish I'd done it sooner. We talked for an hour. She filled in blanks I didn't even know existed. Things I hadn't seen because I'd cut contact. Apparently, Ava had been floating this narrative for months, that I was mentally unwell, that I'd abandoned the family, that I'd only reconnected with my parents for money and then ghosted them again. And worse, my parents had gone along with it, nodding, agreeing, adding spice to the story where needed. You're not crazy, Maya said, voice firm. They've been gaslighting you for years. I knew that. Deep down, I'd always known. But hearing someone say it out loud, someone who used to sit across from me at Thanksgiving dinner, someone who'd seen the same favoritism I lived through, it hit different. After we hung up, I sat in silence. The dog curled up at my feet, completely unbothered by the world unraveling around me. Eli walked in a few minutes later, holding 2 mugs of tea like he knew. Talk to Maya? He asked gently. I nodded. She confirmed everything. He handed me the tea and sat beside me. What do you want to do? That question had been hanging in the air for weeks. What now? I'd cut them off. I'd set boundaries. I'd walked away. But still, they found ways to twist the knife. Through lies, through guilt, through social media, and now, through public humiliation. I looked at Eli and said, I'm done defending myself, but I'm not staying silent anymore. He just nodded. Then let's do this right. The next day, I posted a single story to my locked-down social account. No drama, no name-calling, just truth. A photo from our wedding, Eli and I smiling, surrounded by real love. No family in sight. Then a paragraph. I've stayed quiet for too long, out of fear, out of shame, out of hope. But I won't let other people rewrite my life. I've been lied about, blamed, gaslit. But here's what's real. I've built a life I'm proud of, and no amount of guilt or manipulation will pull me back into the shadows. I choose peace. I choose truth. I choose me. I didn't name names. Didn't need to. The silence after that was louder than anything Ava ever screamed into a camera. For the first time, I felt free. Maya messaged again later that night. That was powerful. You made them squirm. I didn't reply. I didn't need to. That post wasn't for revenge. It was for closure. But apparently, Ava didn't get the memo, because 2 days later, I got a DM from a burner account. No profile picture, no followers, one sentence. If you think you've won, you haven't seen what's coming. Childish, predictable, but still, a little chill crawled down my spine. I wasn't scared, just tired. Tired of the games. Tired of being a plot point in someone else's tantrum. I wasn't playing anymore. But life, as always, had other plans. Because just when I thought the worst was over, when I truly believed the storm had passed, a letter arrived. Again. Only this time, it wasn't from a lawyer. It was from a bank. Eli handed it to me when I got home from the grocery store. Looks important, he said. I opened it. Read the first few lines, then sat down hard on the kitchen stool. It was a mortgage statement. Except, it wasn't ours. It was from my parents' address. And somehow, my name was listed as a co-signer. My pulse kicked into overdrive. I never signed anything. I never agreed to anything. And yet, here it was, my name, attached to a loan I had no idea existed. I called the bank immediately. Waited on hold for 47 minutes, heart thudding the whole time. When I finally got someone on the line and explained the situation, she pulled up the documents. Yes, we do have your signature on file, she said cheerfully. I asked for a copy. She emailed it over. And when I opened the file, I felt sick. It wasn't just my name typed under the signature line. It was my signature, or something that looked a lot like it. I stared at the email on my screen, hands cold, chest tight. It was my name, in ink, on a mortgage I never agreed to. Except, it wasn't my handwriting. It looked close, familiar even, but it was off just enough for the hairs on my arms to stand up. The slant was wrong. The loops too perfect. It was a forged signature. Someone had signed my name on a legal document, and there were only two people who had access to that kind of personal information: my parents. I sat back, trying to slow my breathing. My thoughts were a tangle of disbelief and rage. They didn't just lie. They didn't just manipulate. They committed fraud. Eli came over quietly and placed a hand on my shoulder. "You okay?" I nodded slowly, though I wasn't sure if that was true. They used my name, without permission, to secure a loan on their house. He didn't say anything right away. He just stood there beside me, letting the moment settle. And then he said, calm but firm, "You know we have to do something." I knew. This wasn't a petty argument. This wasn't about emotional boundaries anymore. This was criminal. And this time, I couldn't afford to stay silent. So I called my lawyer. She didn't flinch. "We're filing a fraud report," she said, "and contacting the bank's fraud department immediately." The next few days were a whirlwind. I had to provide proof of my real signature, give statements, sign affidavits. I felt like I was being pulled into a storm I never asked for, but I kept going. Because for the first time, I had no guilt, no shame, just truth. The bank started an internal investigation. My attorney filed paperwork. I submitted copies of my driver's license signature, old lease documents, job contracts, anything that could show what my actual handwriting looked like. And then we waited. During that wait, something inside me shifted. I stopped feeling like a daughter. I stopped wondering what my parents might say or how Ava might spin it. I didn't care anymore. They crossed a line you don't come back from. I wasn't their daughter. I was their resource. And when I stopped being useful, they decided to use me anyway. That realization hurt, but it also freed me. A week later, my lawyer called. "The bank confirmed the signature was forged," she said. "They're moving forward with legal action, and you've been fully cleared of any liability." I exhaled so hard I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath for days. "What does that mean for my parents?" I asked. She paused. "They could face criminal charges." I didn't cheer. I didn't cry. I just nodded. Good. Because the truth is, they chose this. Every step of the way, they had chances to stop. To be honest, to make amends. Instead, they doubled down. And now the consequences were theirs to carry. That night, I sat on the couch with Beans asleep in my lap and Eli beside me. We didn't say much. Just existed in the silence of truth finally being enough. And for the first time in years, I slept through the night. A few days later, I received one last message from Ava. Not a threat this time. Not a guilt trip. Just raw. They're blaming me. Said it was my idea. I didn't know they'd actually do it. I didn't think they'd go that far. There was no apology, no ownership. Just an unraveling of her image, her narrative, her armor. And honestly, I didn't care. I didn't reply. Because Ava didn't get to cry now. She watched this play out from the beginning. She helped twist the knife every time I tried to pull it out. She wasn't a bystander. She was a participant. That message was the last time I heard from any of them. My parents stopped trying after the legal fallout began. The charges didn't stick, turns out. The bank didn't want the publicity, but the damage was done. Their credit was ruined. Their house fell into foreclosure a few months later. And me? I bought a new house with Eli. A small place on the edge of the city with a garden and creaky floors that sing when you walk at night. It's not fancy, but it's mine. And no one had to forge a signature to get it. Maya visits often now. She brings wine and sarcasm and stories from our chaotic family tree. We laugh a lot, sometimes cry. But mostly, we talk like two women who finally see the truth for what it is. Freedom doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes, it's a quiet room with a locked door and no one pounding on the other side. Sometimes, it's a dog snoring beside you and a partner who listens when you speak. Sometimes, it's no longer feeling like you're the villain in someone else's fantasy. It's just peace. Looking back, I don't regret anything. Not the silence, not the boundaries, not the legal battle. Because I know now some families don't fall apart. They were never whole to begin with. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do isn't fighting back. It's walking away. Closing the door, lighting your own fire, and letting it warm the home you chose to build. For anyone who's ever felt like the outsider in their own family, here's what I've learned. You don't owe anyone access to your life just because they knew you as a child. You're allowed to walk away from the people who raised you, especially if they taught you to shrink. And you're allowed to grow bigger than their vision of you. Let them talk. Let them twist. Let them fade. Your story is still yours. And mine is just beginning. Story 2. Just before her wedding, I discovered that my 8-year boyfriend had cheated on her. Everyone made fun of me, so I publicly demanded them apologize. I therefore belonged to a close-knit group of pals from my department when I was a college student. We have maintained contact throughout the years. 3 gals and 4 guys made up the 7 of us. A girl. She was my flatmate in college, and we were almost inseparable. Let's name her Elaine. Since our time in college, she has been my closest buddy, and everything went wrong at her wedding, which I recently attended. I've been dating one of the guys in this group for the last 8 years. Nick, let's call him. To put things in perspective, Nick was initially closer to these individuals. However, once we began dating, I also sort of joined the gang. Elaine went with me as well. When we were in our 2nd year, we began dating. At the time, I was 20, and we have developed together over the last 8 years. Despite a few difficult times, we have consistently succeeded. I've been discussing marriage with him for the past year, but he keeps saying he's not ready. Since we have been living together for the past 4 years and are both very well off in our careers, I find it incredibly strange. Therefore, I fail to see why marriage is such a huge deal. Although I cherish my career, I also wish to be married and have children. And during the past few months, Nick and I have been arguing a lot about that. We've really been together for 8 years, so it doesn't even make sense that he believes I'm hurrying things. In addition, he has been saying that I should put more effort into my work, which is also absurd given that I am the highest paid person I know and have been managing my dad's office supply business for the last 2 years. I'm prepared to follow in the footsteps of many women who achieve great success in their careers while married and raising children. I understood that he was simply refusing to get married because he didn't want to commit to me despite being with me for 8 years, so I didn't really believe he had a point. And it really irritated me. Despite the issues we had been experiencing in our relationship, we haven't split up despite the fact that we've been arguing about this a lot over the previous few months. Other than his behavior, he had been perfectly normal, so I didn't even consider the possibility that he was cheating on me. I would apologize to him, or he would apologize to me. Ultimately, though, I believed that we would always find a way to reconnect. I no longer believe that to be the truth, though, as I discovered after Alan's wedding that he had most likely been unfaithful to me for an unknown amount of time. The icing on the cake was that he had been having an affair with both the bride and my best friend. They made out in my car in the parking lot, of all locations they could have chosen, and I just learned about it a few days ago. However, I chose to pursue the dramatic route and publicly embarrass her rather than simply confronting them right away. Nick and I had traveled to the hotel where Elaine was being married, so that's some background. We were expected to attend the rehearsal dinner in the evening on the day before the wedding. However, I was exhausted from the trip. Additionally, I occasionally have pretty terrible migraines. I thus choose to forego it. My migraines worsened later in the evening, so I had to go get some medication because I had forgotten it when packing. Because I didn't want to walk and observe them fighting, I ended up in the parking lot. I was there for approximately 45 seconds, and when I realized what was happening in the car, I simply turned around and proceeded to leave because I didn't know what to do about what I had just witnessed. They were too preoccupied with one another to see me, and I was fortunate. Since the rehearsal dinner had already ended by that point, I made the decision to visit a friend's room in order to at least discuss what I had just witnessed with them. I was hoping that perhaps they might console me and that I would have the guts to face Elaine and Nick when they returned at last. However, I discovered that our company was already seated inside when I heard a number of voices coming from my friend's room as I was making my way there. It just so happened that they were already discussing Nick and Elaine. In addition to discussing them, they were all giggling behind my back at how ignorant I was of the situation. Thus, they were aware. They had been hiding it from the two of them, and they had known all along. My friend Kate, the only other lady in the group, joked that they would eventually get discovered because of all the sneaking about they had been doing, even while preparing for the wedding. Apparently, they had even gotten together when I left the engagement party early. They all thought this was a lot of fun to discuss, and I was appalled at how casually they were talking about things, as like they didn't care about my sentiments at all. Fortunately, they hadn't even seen me lurking, so I just moved away from the entrance, most likely because they had all consumed a bit too much alcohol. In my opinion, that was the worst day of my life. Even yet, after returning to my room and crying for 15 minutes or so, I made the decision to keep quiet since I had already begun to prepare my strategy, and I was certain that I would give these individuals a lesson that would last a lifetime. I so acted that nothing was wrong when Nick eventually returned to the room, and the next day we went to bed without talking. I welcomed everyone as usual on the wedding day, and everything was going smoothly until I made the decision to stand up straight before the ceremony was about to begin. And I said that I wanted to give a speech in my friend's honor in front of everyone there. That's not how things are done in the past. There were certainly some odd stares, but I suppose Elaine assumed I was going to give a meaningful speech about how I would miss her or something. So she let me. She made a pretty big mistake because I continued to discuss what I had seen the night before and what I had heard our friends discussing in their room later about what had happened at the engagement party while they were relaxing and chatting behind my back. They all had the good sense to appear embarrassed, at least then. However, they don't really matter to me. My sole concern was how my speech would be received by Nick and Elaine. Naturally, they tried to stop me as soon as they realized what was happening. Nick found it much easier because he was there next to me, and he began urging me to sit down and stop talking as though that would make things better. Elaine went completely crazy and began accusing me of being envious of her, claiming that I was deliberately attempting to ruin her wedding because my partner refused to pop the question. I therefore attempted to take her thunder. Her fiancé genuinely believed me, so I suppose she overreacted and became a bit defensive. When she saw she had been abandoned at the altar, he departed the stage. The scene turned into a chaotic one as she began to chase after him, but none of that matters to me at all. After shaking Nick off of me, I drove back home after making my way to the parking lot, where I had previously packed and hidden my luggage before the wedding. I haven't heard from anyone for the first 2 days of the 3 days that have gone by. However, Nick informed me yesterday that both he and Elaine were mistaken. However, my actions were blatantly insane, as it turns out that I not only ruined the wedding, but also her life. She is now destitute and shattered, since her fiancé has already broken up with her, and her parents don't want to be involved. It seems that she had been hoping that this wedding would provide financial support. If you understand, here's a less nuanced explanation. This wedding was a complete farce from the start, and she is a giant gold digger. Despite what they had been telling everyone, she and her fiancé met on a dating app earlier this year, rather than through their parents. In order to avoid being disinherited by his parents and having everything go to his brother, her fiancé, who is 60 years older than her, was given an ultimatum by his parents: either get married and settle down, or keep flirting with a new woman every week. He was therefore open to meeting someone, even if he really had no desire to be married. And up until now, he had been unsuccessful in finding someone who would accept the notion of an open marriage. That is, until Elaine found a way to make this work for them both when he met her on the dating app. Although she wasn't really interested in marriage, she had been unemployed for a year or so and had tried a variety of things, but she was unable to find something that would keep her occupied for longer than 2 or 3 months. She genuinely only wanted to be married to a wealthy person and move on. She was also fortunate because her fiancé's family was well off. I suppose you can all see where I'm coming from with this. Following a few dates, they came to the conclusion that this would be the most effective solution to their respective issues, and everything was resolved for a time. However, I later exposed her at the wedding with that speech. Naturally, her fiancé had to depart as their parents were unaware of their private arrangement. His parents would never have approved of him marrying a woman like that, especially after her friend had embarrassed the entire family in front of so many people. Therefore, they had to cancel the entire arrangement, even if it had been handy, because it was no longer going to work. She hadn't been doing anything worthwhile since she'd been living with her fiancé for the last few months. She had already resigned from her previous sales position. She now has nowhere to go because even her parents won't let her back in after the whole wedding disaster. It's also unlikely that she will find employment easily since she lacks the necessary qualifications, and even if she does, it will likely be a low-paying one. Since Nick believes I should have just confronted them face-to-face rather than publicly shaming them both and causing her a lot of difficulty, I am now being accused of wrecking her life by being inconsiderate. She is currently in serious danger, and even our friends no longer want to talk to either of them. He also seems to assume that I will feel awful about all of this at this very moment. I don't think Elaine's life has been ruined, and I don't feel sorry for her in particular. She only needs to get a job, keep it, and take care of herself rather than depending on others. It's not a negative thing, in my opinion. I think I've done her a favor, if anything, but whatever. The idea of publicly embarrassing both families makes me uneasy since I'm certain that my speech did not speak highly of any of them. Additionally, Elaine's parents are really kind people, and I've met them. That's the one thing Nick said to me that truly resonated with me, and that bit makes me feel a little terrible. I believe I could have just approached them in private and avoided the entire public humiliating situation. Split up with Nick and move on from this in a constructive manner. But now that I've started all of this drama, I feel strange. So, am I the jerk for making fun of my best friend's family in public during her wedding? Since she had been having affairs with my boyfriend. Edit. How long this has been going on is beyond me. My knowledge of this situation is limited to what I overheard while skulking outside the room where my buddies were discussing it. For the most part, they were only joking and saying dumb things about the situation. The only noteworthy thing they said was that I had left the engagement party early because, as I mentioned before, I had a migraine, which is not uncommon. If I spend too much time in a noisy area, it typically does happen. I just have it. I visited several physicians about it, and I take medication for it. However, I have to leave early quite a bit since I require a lot of sleep. Additionally, Nick returns later because I've never felt it would be fair to expect him to accompany me home because many of our friends are generally there. I never had any need to be concerned about how late he would get home until recently. I'm starting to believe, though, that this whole affair has likely been going on for a while, and I was simply unaware of it. But it's okay. Now that it's finished, they may continue hooking up as much as they want. But, for one thing, Nick isn't nearly as wealthy as Ellen wants her men to be, so I don't believe she would really want to spend the rest of her life with him. Additionally, if they do end up together, he will undoubtedly demand her to work since he finds it too stressful to be the main provider. It was his words, not mine. In the past, I thought that was a really respectable characteristic, but I doubt Elaine will share my opinion. She's a much greater drama queen than I am, so I don't believe Nick will be able to put up with her. In any case, that is now their issue. One update. Hello? I haven't responded to Nick's message on whatever transpired with Elaine in the 2 days after I last blogged. I apologize, I was upset about something, but I don't have to feel awful about it. The only thing I did was respond harshly. It's hardly my concern if it makes other folks feel awful. Her parents must have been hurt. However, even if they were kind people, Elaine was clearly not, and she certainly deserved what I did, so I can't say that I'm too sorry about that. Furthermore, I don't feel like apologizing to anyone, not even her parents. I'm avoiding it for the time being. However, I did reply to Nick's SMS, but just to let him know that he must come by shortly to gather everything he needs to go. It goes without saying that I no longer want him to live in my home now that we are no longer together. Additionally, the sight of all his belongings laying around really got to me. I so collected everything, placed it in boxes, and set it away. Therefore, he may just collect those things and go when he does arrive, saving us time. Since I need to know when he will be visiting, he is the one person I haven't blocked yet. I'm going to block him as well as that is over. My other buddies, however, have already been barred. Elaine was the first person I blocked, of course. Now that some time has gone by after the event, I've been feeling pretty angry about everything since all the feelings have started to strike me. It wasn't just one individual that deceived me. My partner, my closest friend, and everyone else I believed to be my family betrayed me because our group was so close. I've been really sad about it, of course, but fortunately, my biological family has supported me and been at my side. For the past several days, they have been stopping by to look after me and, more significantly, to make sure I'm looking after myself. At least I have some individuals watching out for me, and for that, I am very thankful. The second update. Hello. Nick texted me this morning, about 9 days after the event, to let me know that he would be stopping over in the evening to pick up his belongings. That was all well with me, and since he hadn't tried to get in touch with me for the last 9 days, I had figured that when he arrived, he would likely just grab his belongings and go. However, he informed me that he wanted to check the home to see if I had missed anything when he stopped over, and I began to give him the boxes. I was a little dubious about it since I would have to grant him access, which seemed like a laborious procedure. However, since I could have overlooked anything and I wanted to do this assignment all at once, I was unable to decline, so I opened the door for him. After searching the home, he removed a few more items that I had overlooked, and I assumed that was it, that he would simply take them, pack them up, and go. Instead, he began to linger in the living room while carrying those items, which was becoming rather uncomfortable. I thus had to inquire as to whether he intended to go. And then he told me that he really wanted to talk to me, and that he had thought that since a long time had gone by, I would be more willing to talk about the issue this time. It was really annoying because he was talking to me like it had been years since the incident, but it had only been 2 weeks. Furthermore, I don't think I needed to discuss any issues with him. The only thing he did wrong was cheat on me with my best friend, who was getting married soon. I wasn't the issue, they were. I informed him that I had been very explicit in my text message to him, stating that he was only welcome here while he was gathering his belongings. There was no reason for him to remain here or speak to me now that he had done that. Despite the fact that he had cheated, he began to argue with me. Since I wasn't perfect, I should stop pretending that he was solely to blame for this. I had been polite with him up until that point, but I was still making an effort to remain composed despite my growing annoyance by the moment. When he finally said that, I became furious and began yelling at him because I couldn't believe he had the gall to suggest that I might have been responsible for any of this. I'm prepared to accept that I'm by no means a flawless individual. Even before he began to argue back, though, I could tell by the way he said it that I had somehow pushed him to cheat on me. I anticipated what he would say. We had already been having some issues because I wanted to settle down, as I had stated in my initial post. He wasn't prepared for me to get married and have a family right away. I knew that he was going to bring that up because I had been thinking about it myself for a couple of days already, although in a different way. One where I was the victim, but in his opinion, he was the real victim and he was not ready to commit since it was a pretty big deal. And he thought that it was going to be a bad decision for him because he wanted to live his life a little before he got married and started a family. For the past 8 years, he has only ever been with me. We have only ever done things with each other in mind, and apparently, he felt like he doesn't even know who he is, which is somehow supposed to be my fault. I couldn't believe that he thought that these were valid points, because if he had really had such a huge problem with committing to me, even after 8 years of being together, then clearly we had very different opinions, and we wanted very different things from life. So the only 2 ways to have dealt with that were to either keep talking about it and try to come to a common ground or just break up. But he chose to cheat on me so he could have the best of both options, and so he could do whatever he wanted to while keeping me around as backup. Somehow, I was a terrible person for not being okay with something like that. The whole victim playing thing and pretending as if we were both equally at fault here made me so mad that I ended up screaming myself hoarse at him. But even then, he just kept arguing and trying to defend himself, saying that he was under a lot of stress because of me. And Alan evidently simply got him somehow, in a way that I never did. I even repeated telling him to leave, but he wouldn't go away. And he kept insisting that I needed to understand that I was not a flawless person, and I'd been just as poisonous as he had. I would have called the cops on him, but unfortunately, I was so wound up that it didn't even occur to me. But anyway, after a time, I was so thoroughly done with the debate that I went to the door, opened it, and simply stood by it silently as he still kept attempting to explain himself. It took him several minutes to get the idea, and it was incredibly difficult for me not to say anything while he was coming up with absurd arguments to defend himself. But I just kept silent and waited at the open door, waiting for him to come out. Finally, he did depart. But even then, he informed me that I could pretend to be a saint all I wanted to. But deep down, both of us realized that it takes two individuals to damage this relationship. And I fully agree. It did require two individuals. It took him in a lane, but I didn't mention that. It would have simply started up another new affair, and I didn't have the time or energy for that. So he walked out. I shut the door and eventually started attempting to cool myself, because talking to him had really fired me up. He did struggle a lot to acknowledge his mistakes, even when we were together. However, I used to think it was sort of cute back then. However, that was the worst thing ever today. And I'm glad he left at that time because I might have thrown something at him otherwise. Well, that's over with. I'm so pleased that he's gone now. I've already blocked him, and I'm going to dedicate more time to taking care of myself because I believe I need it. Since it truly helps me keep distracted, I've already begun going to the gym more frequently. In addition, I keep a journal. Before I eventually feel like I'm over everything, it will take incremental steps. Because in the end, it was still an 8-year relationship. So whether I like it or not, it will undoubtedly leave a mark. I suppose the only thing I can do is to make sure that this mark doesn't annoy me too much. Hello, the third update. 2 years have passed since my previous update. I've been considering posting here for a while, and now I finally got around to it. Here is an update on the current state of affairs. In terms of work, everything is fantastic. Better than ever, and I'm overjoyed. It feels fantastic that I've also turned into a bit of a fitness nut. For the past 2 years, I haven't spoken to those college pals, and I don't give a damn about how any of them are doing. All I need is my family's support, who have been there for me at every turn, looking after me and making sure I'm doing okay. Only a few people from school and a few coworkers remain my pals, but at least they are decent people who actually care about me. I've also begun dating for the last few weeks, which was entirely out of the question for me in the previous year or so because I was still processing the trauma from my previous relationship. However, at her birthday celebration, one of my friends introduced me to his cousin, and for some reason, he's really polite and lovely. I was immediately attracted to him. From the moment we first met, he was introduced to me by a friend, and we had been dating for some time. I filled him in on every detail of my last relationship, even how long it lasted. So, before we go serious, I want to go slowly with him. He's so lovely that he's even told me that he's willing to wait, since I seem like the ideal lady for him, and he completely knows that he respects me and my thoughts. Regarding marriage and having children, we also agree. He shares my desire for that, and I believe I have at last found the proper person. Nick and Ellen got married a few months after my previous post, but they struggled to make their marriage work for a year. At least I'm happier than them. One of my former college friends, who is a bit of a gossip, told me about their divorce, which took place within a year. Since that would be an outright lie, I can't say that I feel sorry for them at all, but I do hope that they learn a valuable lesson from this and don't let others down the way they did me. They may nevertheless, despite the fact that they are very awful. Nevertheless, I feel as though I've moved past whatever transpired. Indeed, I am content. Watch this space for further tales on our partnerships. All right. Story 3. My father threatened to boycott my wedding unless I included my sister, who had an affair with my ex. He lost when I replaced him. That day was only the beginning. Zach, the love of my life, and I were married this month. You would think that as newlyweds, we would be preparing for the future, enjoying our honeymoon, or simply relishing the beginning of this new chapter in our lives. Instead, because my father is making my life intolerable, I'm going to Reddit today in a desperate attempt to find clarity and guidance. I can't help but worry whether I'm to blame for this. I'll give you some background. The problem stems from my choice to have my father escort me down the aisle during my wedding. This may appear to be a lovely, ordinary gesture at first glance. It's crucial to remember, though, that my dad and I have never been close. mostly due to the way he treated me. My mother passed away while giving birth to me, you see. My dad wasn't even present at the time. When my mom unexpectedly went into labor, he was gone on a work trip. There were issues. She lost a significant amount of blood, and the doctors were unable to rescue her. My dad received the heartbreaking news that his wife had left by the time he got back. I, a newborn he had never met, was all that remained of him, and who, in his opinion, was to blame for his wife's passing? This established the tone for all subsequent events. I now realize that it must have been extremely painful for him to lose my mother in the manner that he did. However, it became evident over time that his sadness had evolved into animosity against me. It was not a veiled resentment. It was audible and shown in the way he handled me. Because I was the baby who lived when my mother did not, I have frequently felt as though I was bearing the burden of guilt for something over which I had no control. When I was younger, my father wouldn't even look at me, according to my elder sister Mary, who is 4 years older than me. She said that he would complain to everybody who would listen about how much I reminded him of his mother. It seems that he employed a full-time nanny, and I spent almost the whole day with her. I thus felt abandoned and unwelcome during my early years. Even though it was never explicitly said to me, I grew up feeling this rejection quite strongly. My father treated me as if I didn't exist, while other children had a loving father to rely on. Mary, however, was always Dad's favorite. It's not just my viewpoint. Over the years, Mary and I have come to terms with that truth. My father made no effort to conceal it. He showered her with care and attention in ways I could only imagine. The golden kid, she was impervious to my presence and could do no wrong. I recall being given the responsibility of becoming the family assistant after I turned 10 or 11. Mary was excused from doing any of the housework while Dad would give me instructions. He would defend it by claiming that Mary should concentrate on her academics and not be distracted by chores like laundry or dishwashing when I questioned why. However, he advised me to learn how to deal with these situations because I wasn't as academically strong as Mary and may wind up becoming a stay-at-home mom. This was obviously unfair, but he didn't give a damn. I had to take the fall for it. Dad would become irate if I ever ventured to complain or ask for assistance as I cleaned, scrubbed, and folded clothing. As a child, I thought that the worst punishment was when he threatened to ground me or take away my phone. I was informed that everything I wanted, a book, a new clothing, anything was superfluous or a waste of money. Mary, on the other hand, appeared to have anything she desired without giving it a second thought. He would blatantly refuse to come get me if I phoned him to come get me stuck someplace, even if it meant going home by myself. However, Dad would drop everything to be there for Mary if she needed a ride, whether it was 5 minutes away or an hour away. For her, there was just absolute dedication, no questions, no excuses. It was frustrating how unjust it was. Mary eventually began taking advantage of Dad's prejudice to further complicate my life. For example, if anything broke around the house, she would point the finger at me right away, knowing full well that my father would support her and punish me regardless of how much I disputed it or clarified what had truly happened. Mary would make fun of me for being interested in arts and crafts. I've always enjoyed creating things with my hands since I'm a creative person. However, Mary would turn this enthusiasm against me by making fun of me in front of my father, calling me a female and kid, and claiming that arts and crafts were just for losers. Instead of standing up for me, he would make fun of me with her. It was something that brought me joy, thus it hurt a lot. Nevertheless, it gave my family even more excuse to treat me as though I wasn't good enough. Sometimes I stuck up for myself or argued with Dad. Mary would intervene on his behalf, portraying me as a rude and challenging youngster. She even went so far as to declare, once during a dispute, that Mom would have been embarrassed to have had a child like me. She went on to say that she wishes I had passed away rather than Mom since I was ruining her and Dad's lives. I was devastated by the comment. What would happen if you heard your father and sister say similar things nearly every other day? You start to keep things to yourself and learn to live with guilt. All of this taught me to be very careful around Mary and my father. I felt as like I had to be on guard all the time to avoid saying or doing anything that might make them reprimand or criticize me. I had had enough of being held responsible for Mom's passing. I began to tally the days and years before I could go off to college. And I didn't turn around when I eventually had the opportunity. In order to sustain myself, I ultimately acquired my own job after moving out. I felt as though I had at last experienced independence, the capacity to live my life without the continual shadow of my sister and father. Things with Dad got a little better once I moved out. We stopped seeing one another frequently, not because we grew closer. It was simpler to avoid altercations or heated situations because of the physical distance. Mary, meantime, lived with her father for free because she never looked for a permanent work. She would tell everyone throughout the years that this was how she saved money, when, in fact, I knew she simply enjoyed my dad's favoritism and coddling. Despite the fact that she was an adult and ought to have been educated to be more self-reliant and accountable, he enjoyed caring for her. She allowed him with pleasure. Dad once invited my then-boyfriend and I to stay at his place for Thanksgiving. It didn't make me very happy. I consented out of courtesy, even though I wasn't close to them. In order to spend the remainder of the trip with his family, where things were cozier and more friendly, my boyfriend and I agreed that we would only be staying for 3 nights. Things took a turn for the worst when Mary met my ex during that Thanksgiving visit. She had been flirting with him in ways that felt completely out of place ever since they were first acquainted. She continued to laud him, calling him attractive and handsome, while quietly demeaning me by stating that she never imagined her ugly duckling sister would find love with someone like him. Even though I was clearly insulted, I didn't want to argue with her in front of my ex-boyfriend. But when she started looking for reasons to touch him, her actions went too far, leaning into fun or intimate touches on his shoulder, lightly brushing his arm. I wasn't the only one who felt uneasy. The contempt was immense. I made an effort to act responsibly at this point. I drew her aside and gently requested that she calm down, pointing out that her behavior might be upsetting him. As usual, though, Mary dismissed me, telling me that I was exaggerating and that my envy was ruining the evening. She even laughed at me, dismissing my worries as unimportant. Dad walked upstairs to his bed after supper, leaving Mary, my ex, and I in the living room to watch a movie. An evening that should have been comfortable and restful soon devolved into yet another awkward circumstance. Mary continued to play fight with my ex like a kid throughout the film, pushing, taunting, and invading his personal space. The fact that my ex appeared to be taking pleasure in all the attention only made matters worse. I wouldn't say, however, that he was overtly returning her advances. Nor, of course, was he discouraging, observing both of them. I felt like a delayed wheel to my sister and boyfriend, totally marginalized. It was embarrassing. I finally lost my patience with the film at one point. Feeling insulted in my own family's house was too much to bear, and I was exhausted both physically and emotionally. Leaving them alone to complete the movie, I excused myself and went upstairs to sleep. I expected my lover would eventually join me in my room, but he never did. The next morning, I woke up early and the home was unnaturally silent. Something seemed strange instantly, especially since I realized that my then-lover hadn't slept next to me at all throughout the night. Anxious and a bit suspicious, I decided to go downstairs to check on him, thinking maybe he'd fallen asleep on the couch while watching the movie, but he wasn't there. A pit began to grow in my stomach as I thought about where else he may be. Against my better judgment, I headed towards Mary's chamber, my pulse hammering. I opened the door, and there they were. My biggest nightmare playing out before my eyes. Half naked, my sister and my ex were sharing a bed. There were 2 empty wine glasses and bottles on the floor next to them. I felt ill to my stomach at the sight. The realization that he had slept with my sister made my mind spin with shock and rage. Mary, my sister, was the only person he could have cheated on me with. For as long as I could remember, that one individual had already made my life miserable. I was unable to control my anger. They were startled awake by my scream. I started hurling pillows at them aggressively, and they both seemed shocked and alarmed. My ex began stuttering apologies, again saying that it was an error and pointing the finger at the drink. Both of them, he claimed, had been too inebriated to understand what they were doing. As though that justified what they were doing, his remarks just infuriated me. Betrayal is not eliminated by intoxication. Mary's response was much more painful. She never expressed regret, She didn't even appear remorseful or ashamed. As an alternative, she dared to order me to leave her room so she could change. As though I was the one who had caught them in the act, she screamed at me for violating her privacy. I was rendered speechless by her utter lack of regret, her haughtiness, and her attempt to use the situation against me. At the absolute least, I thought my dad would sympathize with my anger or at least provide some support when I told him what had occurred. At first, he appeared to be as astonished and horrified as I was. I had a fleeting hope that he would truly support me. His tone changed, though, and he made it clear to me that even though he didn't agree with Mary's behavior, he wouldn't stop her since Mary and my ex were both adults and could do whatever they pleased. He pretended that my sister's affair with my ex-boyfriend was a minor indiscretion that could be ignored rather than a grave betrayal. Dad's attempt to shift the responsibility back to me just made it worse. I should have been more selective about the type of man I brought into the family, he said. According to him, it was essentially my responsibility for bringing my ex back around because he had a loose character, Mary. He seemed to think that I should have foreseen my ex's betrayal, or worse, that I had purposefully prepared myself for this heartache. I felt as though I was losing my sense of reality because of his remarks. In this case, my sister wasn't an innocent bystander. She intentionally sought out my ex despite being well aware of how hurtful it would be to me. However, my father minimized her part, almost clearing her of all responsibility and placing the full burden on me. It seemed as though he would not hold Mary responsible for her actions. In the end, I understood what I had to do, regardless of how obviously selfish or cruel it was. I ended my relationship with my ex right away. I couldn't continue to be with someone who would betray me so severely, especially with my own sister, and there was no turning back from what he had done. After this, I severed all contact with Mary. She never expressed regret or even an apology. Rather, she seized the circumstance and made it into a point of boasting. She claimed that he had reportedly told her she was better in bed than me, and she went around telling our relatives about how she had taken my guy in a single night. She stated it with satisfaction, as though harming me was some sort of twisted success, and it was disgusting and degrading. My dad's failure to hold Mary accountable was further strained by my connection with him, and his choice to support her, even if only subtly, was the last straw. I didn't communicate with him. Sometimes Dad would attempt to talk to me to make things better, but I would ignore him. But then, suddenly, things were different. My dad had a serious health scare earlier this year. Although the physicians managed to save him, the encounter left him fragile and in need of medical attention. I was the one who volunteered to assist him in spite of all the hurt and animosity I carried inside. I knew I had the resources and the desire to accomplish it, not because I had to. Despite everything, I didn't want to lose my dad any more than I had already lost my mother. I was largely responsible for his recuperation. To make sure he was comfortable and recuperating properly at home, I hired a carer and covered medical expenses that his insurance did not cover. I did it because it seemed right, even if it wasn't easy. In contrast, my sister did very nothing to assist. She didn't seem very motivated to help, and her income isn't enough to cover anything significant. She just let me take care of all of Dad's duties. Dad's eyes must have finally awakened to the reality at this period. He became aware of how much I was doing for him while Mary did nothing. He apologized to me, which surprised me. He admitted his treatment of me as a child, his failure to support me, and his decision to overlook Mary's behavior when it most wounded me. I felt for the first time in my life that my father genuinely understood the suffering he had caused me. Even while it didn't completely erase everything, it was a healing moment that gave us the opportunity to begin mending our relationship. We started conversing more, and I felt hopeful for the first time in a long time. I thus thought it would be appropriate to include my dad when I started organizing my wedding. Our relationship appeared to be gradually getting better, and in spite of everything, I wanted him to be present for such a significant life event. But there was no way of inviting Mary. She had never shown regret for what she had done to me or offered an apology. I wanted to maintain the fact that she and I were not romantically involved, but my dad started pressuring me to invite her, maybe feeling more confident now that we were back in touch. Mary had changed, he said. and she should be given another opportunity. I questioned him directly about whether she had truly changed. If she was sorry, then why hadn't she even contacted me to apologize? It shouldn't be too much to expect for an apology. Dad, however, reacted angrily, stating that I should not press Mary for an apology and that I should leave the past be the past. He maintained that my wedding was the ideal chance for us all to start over, because the event with my ex had occurred years ago. After all that had happened to me, I was shocked that he was asking me this. He wanted me to just forgive and move on from Mary's actions, without even acknowledging that she had done anything wrong. It seemed like another instance of his justifying her actions while anticipating that I would be diplomatic. However, I wasn't going to allow it to occur this time. I told him no, and I stood my ground. Mary had no place in my life until she apologized, which was the first step towards making apologies. Not at my wedding, anyhow. At this point, my dad made it clear that he wouldn't be going if Mary wasn't invited. He wouldn't accompany me down the aisle either. They even attempted to influence me by claiming that their absence would lead to rumors and that I would look bad for not having them by my side on such a significant day. I understood that he was attempting to manipulate the circumstance and use guilt to get me to comply with his wishes once more. I disinvited him completely, though, since I had decided that I would not be manipulated by him or anybody else. He didn't deserve to be a part of my special day if he wasn't going to respect my limits. I requested my paternal grandfather to accompany me down the aisle instead. Grandpa agreed right away when I explained the matter to him. He felt privileged to assume the position and was quick to voice his displeasure with my dad's actions. Like many other family members, Grandpa was aware of my dad's partiality and how he had always held me responsible for my mother's passing. The fact that Dad hadn't changed despite everything made him terribly sad. In any case, I had a lovely wedding day. We had a great day celebrating with those who genuinely cared about me and my happiness, and Grandpa proudly led me down the aisle. It seemed like the new beginning I had always imagined, surrounded with support and affection. My dad, however, was obviously not going to take it so lightly. When he learned what had transpired after the wedding, he threw a huge fit. He contacted me furious and expressed his shock that I had planned a wedding without him. Grandpa had no right to escort me down the aisle, and he was furious that I had asked him to take his place. He acknowledged that he had fully expected me to back down and welcome him back. However, it was the wedding present I had gotten from my grandfather that appeared to truly send Dad over the brink. Grandpa, who had been so encouraging to me during this whole process, made a startling news during the reception, you see. He said that he wanted to give me his vacation home as a wedding present so that my husband and I could create new memories there. This came as a complete surprise, and I was really grateful. Grandpa told me he didn't think we should be married. I was the one who genuinely recognized the importance of family and the memories associated with the home. He assured me that I would treasure it and care for it in the same way that he had. His gesture meant the world to me, but as my dad's only child, it has angered him. Dad had always thought that everything, even the vacation home, would pass to him. Dad believes that I have betrayed him by giving it to me as a present. My dad and Mary have been accusing me of taking the vacation house from them ever after the wedding. They have been putting pressure on me to return it to my dad, claiming that he has the legal right to inherit his grandfather's only child. The charges are ridiculous and unjust. As expected, Mary has been the most outspoken, encouraging Dad and painting me as a shrewd opportunist who exploited Grandpa's kindness to update one and respond to some of the most often requested questions. Does your sister have a spouse? No. My sister has not yet tied the knot. She avoids long-term partnerships because she despises commitment. Why does your grown sister continue to live with your father? The reason for this is because my dad is Mary's pillar of support, and he is his golden kid. Their relationship has always been codependent, and it appears to be effective for them. Dad enjoys lavishing her with affection. I've put a lot of effort into being independent. Mary still depends on my father for everything. She does not have any savings or a reliable source of income. Why didn't your grandparents confront your father sooner to support you? They did. My grandparents have always been involved in my life and have done everything in their power to support me. They made many attempts to speak with my dad, but he remained the same. They weren't responsible for my upbringing after all. My dad owned it. He ought to have taken charge, taken responsibility, and been the parent I needed. I recognized that he was in mourning and that he was devastated by my mother's passing. However, that doesn't justify his partiality or carelessness. All I felt as a child was unwelcome and unloved. Dad should have risen above his grief and taken care of me since he was the parent and the adult. After your mother died, did your dad date anyone? No. My father has been unmarried for years. Even now, he still laments my mother's passing. He never really recovered from her death, in my opinion. Second update, I had a meeting with Dad today. After weeks of him phoning and messaging me nonstop, I finally made the decision that it would be best to meet him in person and end this continuous drama. I made it clear to him when we first met that he needed to give up the notion that he had a right to inherit the vacation home and that I would not give it to him. Grandpa's choice was final, and he had given it to me as a gift. Naturally, this did not sit well with my dad. He accused me of stealing something that was rightfully his, calling me manipulative and selfish. He claimed that I had already learned a lot from him over the years, and it appears that I have learned even more from him now. I wasn't shocked by what he said, but it still hurt. At this point, I asked him directly, "Why do you hate me so much?" while maintaining eye contact. "How did I ever hurt you?" He seemed surprised by my questions. I saw Dad hesitate for a second, but I persisted. I informed him that I had always been aware that he held me responsible for my mother's passing. But was that all that made him hateful? I told him that when my mother passed away, I was still a baby. What then did he think I would do to save her? He should feel bad for not being there for her when she needed him the most. But I was innocent. Instead of being away on a business trip, he ought to have been there for my mom. I told Dad that it wasn't fair that he kept blaming me for his sorrow and guilt. I never was at fault, and I never was. But he had been punishing me for something I couldn't control all my life. The weight of what I had said hung in the air. My dad initially attempted to avoid giving me a direct response, but I persisted and told him that this was his opportunity to finally and definitively express whatever was on his mind. Simply let it all out. My dad finally came clean at this point. He informed me that he was opposed to my mother becoming pregnant and that he had never wanted a second child. He described how Dad and I had encouraged Mom to have an abortion, even though the doctor had warned of the risks. In the end, she made the choice, and he had no control over it. He therefore accused me of stealing her from him when she passed away while giving birth to me. He told me that he wished I had never been born for years, and that he missed Mom even more as I got older and began to resemble her. As he spoke, my heart ached. Dad told me that he didn't realize I was more like his mother in other ways, particularly in how giving and caring I am, until I took care of him this year after his health scare. He finally began to feel a great deal of guilt at this point, and he apologized to me for it. He told me that although he truly felt bad about how he treated me, he was powerless to stop himself because my sister was easier than I was. He acknowledged that Mary never made him think of his mother. She never forced him to face his own suffering because she was more like him. My dad then told me that he had hoped my wedding would make things better. He wanted to attend my wedding as a single family. However, it seems that I had ruined everything when I disinvited him and failed to invite Mary. He claimed that I had betrayed him by asking Grandpa to walk me down the aisle, depriving him of the experience of being a father. What I was hearing was unbelievable. He had the gall to accuse me of something after everything he had done to me. Even though all I had ever done was attempt to mend a relationship that was always one-sided, it seemed as though I had done him a wrong. I laughed at what he said, feeling numb and angry at the same time. I made it obvious to him that I would never be good enough for him. I was obviously going to be the family's scapegoat no matter what. I had given up on attempting to mend our relationship at this point. He no longer merited my care or my effort. I informed him that he could no longer count on me to cover his medical expenses or provide assistance if he ever ended up in the hospital again. Rather, he ought to depend on Mary, his beloved daughter, who is incapable of managing her own money each month. I also reminded Dad that the vacation house was a gift from Grandpa, who gave it to me alone. I told him that I was done trying to defend or explain my behavior, so if he had any issues with that, he could talk to Grandpa. Dad continued to argue, but I was tired of hearing it and soon walked away. Dad has called me multiple times since, but I haven't bothered to answer. Right now, I just want to focus on my marriage and am over his toxic presence. My husband, Zach, has been an incredible support system during all of this. He supports me and is aware of the problems in my family. Update 3, I haven't posted anything in nearly a month. My dad persisted in trying to guilt trip me even after our talk. He apologized profusely in one text after another, attempting to persuade me to reconsider everything. He expressed regret for the things he said and the way he treated me. I'm hoping I'll change my mind and think twice before cutting him off. Since I was the only person he could trust to look after him when he got sick, he told me that he would truly need me by his side whenever he fell ill in the future. However, nothing changed regardless of how many times I read his messages. His speech sounded hollow. Too late, too little. I no longer believed that his apologies were an attempt to regain control. Mary, meanwhile, blamed me for everything in a lengthy, irate message. She told me that I had already caused my father a great deal of suffering and that it was unjust of me to threaten to cut him off. She also told me that she had to grow up without a mother because of me. She claims that I am a curse on everyone and that I am to blame for the disintegration of our family. She even went so far as to say that I would receive my karma because I had stolen the vacation house from my father. I blocked her instead of wasting time responding to her. She can scream and cry all she wants, but she can't change the fact that the vacation home belongs to me.